Hello, welcome back to Search with Sean, and this is another Real Talk with Sean episode. I've got a superstar lineup. I'll quickly introduce them, and then we get into the topics because time is of the essence, and I want to make sure that we really get into the topics. So, yeah, let's get into our great guests today. And like I say, they really need no introductions, to be honest with you, but it's tradition, so I will do it. First of all, we have Yordan Dimitrov, currently the SEO manager at digital marketing agency Reflect Digital, and soon to be Brighton SEO speaker, which is, I know everyone is excited about that on LinkedIn. Also, Mark Williams-Cook, the digital marketing director at digital agency Candor, or as the French say, Candor, and founder of Also Ask, which is a great talk. And we also have Nikki Halliwell, and she's a senior technical SEO manager at Journey Further and co-founder of Tech SEO North. And she also has an awesome newsletter, so do go and sign up for that. I highly recommend that one. And we have Dave Cousin, so founder of Dave the SEO Co. Dave is a high-end SEO and organic search consultant and trainer, and he brings 20 years of experience to the table. So yeah, thank you all for joining me today. I'm really, really excited about this one. I have been for quite a few weeks. Great lineup, but yeah. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us, Sean. I have to ask, is that sick riff at the beginning on the intro AI, or did you jam that out?
I'd like to say it was me, but it was just one that the tool gave to me. So I don't know how they produced it, but yeah, it's quite cool. So, there's so much noise and conflicting advice out there right now in the SEO world, especially. What's one recommendation that you believe SEO should definitely act on now, and what one should they probably ignore or challenge, and why? Because I'm sure like everyone else go through LinkedIn and there's a lot of conflicting opinions, which is fine, but it obviously can be confusing as well. So Nikki, I'll pass over to you first, if that's okay.
Stop listening to all the noise on LinkedIn, and there's like so many people coming up with new acronyms and GEO and whatever the new one is this week. It's all SEO, whether you call it GEO, one of the new ones, or search everywhere optimization, or just search optimization, which is what it is. It's all the same, and there's a lot of misinformation, and everyone's saying you need to do this to be visible in LLMs. But it's none of that. Basically, nobody knows concretely what you need to do to be visible in those platforms. There's people testing, but there's no one-size-fits-all approach. There's no one-size-fits-all to SEO in general, but it's all experimentation. I mean, I pilot a framework recently called Visible, how to be visible in LLMs. And essentially, there's nothing completely out of the ordinary in that. If you've already got a concrete SEO strategy and you're working with a reputable agency, you should be hitting all of those things anyway, because it's things like making sure you've got crawlable content, you've got useful, helpful content, structured data, brand mentions and PR and all of the stuff that we've been saying for years. It's all of those signals that you need to keep doing to be visible on those platforms. There's nothing black hat, no hidden secrets. It's just keep doing what you're doing and making sure that you're as visible as possible by doing the right things.
Yeah, fair enough. And Yordan, what's your thoughts?
I agree with all the points which Nikki mentioned, and I think especially when it comes to like reading third-party information, make sure that it actually has some data to back it up. If it's a study, there's a big difference between something being a fact and an opinion. But even in instances where there is an actual fact, also try and see how reputable that is and whether it's being cited by third parties in order to be able to adapt. I think everyone at the moment is learning how to adapt to this new environment. And it's about us collectively experimenting. And I think if anyone is calling themselves a specialist already or an expert, then I don't think that we should really trust that. So take things with a pinch of salt, but make sure that whatever you read is verified. And also trust your guts in terms of your idea of what a good UX should look like to be able to attract those customers to your website.
Yeah, I'd say I definitely agree. There's a lot of noise and there's a lot of stuff that you have to ignore. You just can't keep up with absolutely everything. But at the same time, I think the wrong thing is to not take AI seriously and just assume that everything's the same. It's the same job and it's still SEO, and the best place people to optimize for AI as it is now and as it's going to be in the future are definitely us SEOs. It's actually a great opportunity for us, but there are some things that are going to be different. And a lot of that is around accessibility. So, the fact that AI tools, AI agents don't crawl web pages in the same way that search engines do. It's got some similarities, but there are extra things. And these are the kind of things that, we're still a little bit up in the air exactly what standards and so on are going to be used. But as those standards get put into place, and we get a clearer idea of what the future looks like, I think now is the time to act and start planning.
So I have an easy test for this, for even if you're non-technical, which is if you're spending a lot of time doing something for SEO, I would ask the question, would I be doing this thing if search engines didn't exist? Because a lot of good things you do for SEO, say, you would still do digital PR and get your site talked about on other websites and get it linked to, even if SEO didn't exist. You would still write good content if SEO didn't exist. So they're things that you're building equity in your business for. If you are focusing on something that you are only doing for SEO, it's normally either temporary or you're chasing the algorithm. Doesn't mean all those things are bad. So an example is, for instance, structured data, canonical tags, right? These things only exist for robots. But like Gary Ish said, the vision of Google in the future is we won't need structure. That's like a crutch. We don't want to have to use it. So I guess the things I'm kind of avoiding at the moment are things that feel like keyword density, keyword stuffing stuff from 2000. Like when I see conversations around things like semantic triples, like that's kind of how I should be writing content anyway. And I'm not convinced that's like a thing. Nobody's, for me, done, as Nikki said, people are doing tests. Nobody's done a good demonstration on this is working. And I think some of the arguments I've seen for it have been pretty weak, to go Yordan's point about if there's evidence for it. So yeah, that's my main thing. Would we be doing this thing if a search engine didn't exist? If the answer is yes, then you're probably onto a good thing and carry on doing that. Anything else, follow other advice.
I guess from my point of view, obviously it does vary from, you have to take your own case studies as well. Like you can't just read all other people's case studies and then try and, obviously they can give you some influence on doing your own sort of test and stuff, but you should also always be looking at your own sort of test and A/B tests and case studies yourself, because every website varies, doesn't it, depending. The publishers that met with Google, and they were saying that they were doing all the right things and they were doing all the things that Google said, and they were still being, demoted and kind of traffic dropping and stuff. So, that kind of concerns people in the industry, that they feel they are doing the right things and they're still not getting the rewards. So yeah, I think that's a concern, that people are feeling they're putting a lot of good content out there, doing the right things, like you said, Mark, and then they're still not seeing the rewards. So but I totally agree with like what you said about, it was interesting about the structured data and working on things that actually may be a bit irrelevant going forward, perhaps, and putting a lot of effort into it, and it may not have the rewards that you want down the line.
I mean, one thing I thought that was interesting from the Creator Summit you're talking about was I saw a write-up where they said Google has basically said outright that the algorithm had ended up favoring larger sites. That wasn't intentional. And they said that that's the way the algorithm evolved. And I think that's really interesting language, because it points to them using like a machine learning model, obviously, to weight that classifier. And I think it's natural that people have a bias towards brands they know, and that's therefore been magnified by the algorithm, right? Because people are clicking on brands that they recognize. We've known that for years. There's loads of click-through studies that have shown that. I think that connects to when you say people are doing the right things. I think people are doing partially the right things. If you look at the search quality guidelines, when it talks about the whole EEAT, very fluffy concept, it does specifically say that the author can be considered to be the website. So it's not about like individual, oh yeah, like Jack wrote this. It's did this website, or do I trust the website that wrote this? And I think that links to, again, these, if you disappear from search, are people still going to specifically hunt you out because they're searching for your brand? I don't think people were doing enough of that. They were just doing kind of the content like everyone else was, but they weren't giving people a reason to choose them. And that's not something we had to do previously, because it used to just work, right? You just did the keyword research, did the content, published it. If it was niche enough, it would just rank. That's coming back to the point of, are you doing things that you would do outside of SEO? If not, maybe you're algorithm chasing. So if you were doing all that stuff before, it was really working, but that was very algo focused. So when the algorithm changed, because we hadn't been aiming ahead strategically, then we've lost out. And of course, there are exceptions. There has definitely been collateral damage. I've seen examples of, pretty good sites that did have brand searches that still got smacked. So I don't think they got it right. But that's where kind of the nuance I think about that in.
I was going to add, just on the topic of just how much noise there is out there, how many different opinions there are out there. It's one thing, for us as SEOs to, try and keep up with things and, have some idea who is worth listening to and not worth listening to. But I think the other problem that comes from it is when our clients, when our bosses are just getting some of that noise and they're getting little bits and pieces of information and they're getting badly informed because there's so much bad information out there, maybe they're not seeing the right information. And that's a real problem. So I think with that, focusing on those case studies where they exist, focusing on being able to kind of save those case studies, save the data and have them in our back pockets. So when a client asks, why are you not doing this thing that I read about when I was on LinkedIn last week, we've got an answer to that as well and why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, I agree with Dave's point, and I think the way that I've personally approached it with some of my clients, especially the more engaged ones, is that I kind of try and go to them with some of the key metrics first and say, okay, this is what's been going on. I'm going to include it in your summary as part of your monthly Looker report and talk about what's currently happening within the industry. So for example, the June algorithm update, which launched on the 30th, people talking about the great decoupling, AI mode coming to the US, and that's soon going to eventually roll out in the UK. So have been that kind of voice for them and saying, we're already aware of it, don't panic, so that they could give us that trust and be confident that we're there to deliver the work and that we're fully aware, and that they could ignore that noise and those LinkedIn influencers that are just trying to go for the clickbait post.
Yeah, and I would just add to what everybody's already said by just keep testing, keep learning. That's a completely valid approach and something that we should be doing at the minute. And you can use that to get buy-in, but also to combat a lot of the misinformation out there. You can use your own data, similar to what Yordan was saying, to be like, well, no, I'm not going to listen to this Joe Blogs influence on LinkedIn who's saying this because I fundamentally know it's wrong. But what we've done instead is X, Y, Z, and that led to this outcome for you. And then you can look to employ similar things on other clients and see if it does have the same effect on the second client that it had on the first one. And that would be interesting to see. And then you can start to build that out into the overall strategy. But as we've all said, it's not one size fits all. So it would be interesting to see, and there definitely would be differences across industry. It's going to be very different in e-commerce versus something that's more informational and publisher based.
Yeah, great points, and all very valid. I think I had an interest. Myself and a few other charities went to meet with Google this week, actually, a similar kind of meeting to one we just discussed. And it's very interesting. I can't say too much, but obviously there's some concerns about misinformation around the health sector, obviously some of the results given, and some of the favoring of the larger organizations, like we were saying, like you're saying, Mark, around that, and adding more diversification around results would be ideal, and signposting. So it was a really interesting meeting, and I'm sure more will come out of that in due course. So let's move on to the next topic, because this is actually really interesting, I think, because it is something been going on in my head. And when I did that survey recently that a few of you kind of took part in, it kind of came out quite a lot. The role of SEO tools, obviously Mark's going to have a big say in, but the role of SEO tools going forward, and the backlink services as well, they're still out there, they still operate. What do you think their roles are? Obviously, some are adapting already. Some of the tools are already adapting. Some are probably more future-proof than others. Nikki, what do you think?
I think it's all new and it's all still changing, but you need to understand how these tools are collecting their data, especially when it comes to AI, and if it's data that we can trust, which is, again, going back to Yordan's point. I'll probably have more to say later on, but backlinks are still valuable. It's something that isn't going anywhere, and there's been a lot more talk about digital PR in the industry lately because of AI and various platforms. And I was at Manchester BM last night, and again, there was a lot of talk there about saying how digital PR is having its second coming, as they called it. And there's a lot of PRs in the room that, of course, were really excited by that. And it's a lot about brand mentions being more relevant again, finally, as they were putting it. But backlinks are always still going to be relevant. It's just making sure that they're valuable as always. They're from reputable platforms, which is what a lot of us have been saying for years. It's quality over quantity.
Yeah, I think so. And yeah, I think there's a recent study in Hrefs that said about the correlation between brand mentions and branded anchors and stuff around getting seen. So yeah,
it's like the new bit in Hrefs as well, where it's talking about, like, is it text tracking or something similar, where it's looking at the text that's before and after the anchors. So, like, it's not who's talking about you, it's what they're saying, and a lot more it's around context. So it's not just a case of I've got a link or got a mention in this red top or this really reputable website. It's okay, what are they saying, good things about you or not? And that's playing more and more of an important factor in everything.
And from my perspective, we've done some great PR for one of our clients, and we got them to appear across both citations. So in terms of our own, like their particular website, as well as them being featured on some like news editorial content. And that basically gave us that position on the AI overviews to be both like the actual business to go to for that particular good, as well as that kind of reputational element of, oh, there you go, we've been featured on X editorial. And that kind of plays in together with what Nikki talked about just now, which is the like reviews and how you're being perceived as a brand, to be able to help people, like give them the nudge and ensure that your brand reputation is strong and allow you to bring those people to your site. And I think Mark made a really good point earlier about how we're shifting from general search and like content just for the sake of content. It's about giving people what they're after and focusing on them actually looking for you explicitly as a business through that brand authority and that trust that you want to like perceive across to them.
I think a lot of SEOs would like backlinks not to be a thing anymore. And when we talk about backlink services, I think it's very tempting to hand things over to these backlink services who, promise that they're going to get these fantastic links. But the reality is, like, backlinks are something to use strategically as part of what you're doing overall. So you really want to keep control. And there are some good backlink agencies out there who work very closely with you and get you exactly what you need. There's a lot out there who are just going to get you whatever they can. So I think backlink services maybe have some role, but that doesn't necessarily reflect actually just how important backlinks are. But that should really be something you're trying to do yourself. And as it has been for a very long time now, it really is about quality over quantity.
And something nobody's mentioned yet is all of the LLMs companies are buying backlink data in bulk from all the big SaaS companies. We saw in the DOJ documents, Gemini in their pre-training, which is obviously the main part of the core model training where they go and steal everything from the internet. They use Google metrics in that to kind of weight the tokenization. So links are being used by LLMs because they have an unsolved problem, right? Which is one of the foundations of a classic search engine is the link graph, right? What do LLMs have? They essentially have like a language graph. I think it's a good way to describe it. They map relationships in language. But the problem they have in mapping relationships in language is they don't know who's saying what and which source they should and shouldn't trust, which is what search engines specialize in. And the way they've been combating that is, one, trying to weight the initial pre-training with link graph data, and two, all of the RAG, the retrieval augmented generation that happens through search engine indexes, which are already weighted or at least cut down sets of results based on the things search engines know about those sites. So at the moment, links are important. I think natural links, if you want to call that, by that I mean actually getting people editorially to choose to talk about you, are more important because they have a big imprint on the language graph as well as just the, hey, you've got a link, that's cool. And obviously it goes into the other metrics Google uses around kind of where actual users are clicking. I think the interesting question, which I have no answer for, and I have not heard anyone have an answer for, is, okay, if this paradigm of AI search works because they have all this data from this link graph data from search engines, right? Whether it's the index or for pre-training, what happens when inevitably lots of people start having the whole journey inside the AI search? So they're no longer visiting the website. They're no longer even going to Reddit. They're not linking to things that they like anymore. The traffic data isn't going to those URLs anymore. So all of that data that helps validate and surface these sites basically just rots away and stops becoming useful. And we're just left with a language graph. How does that get fixed? I haven't heard anyone suggest how it's going to happen. And that to me is like the big, I think there's a lot of race to get the ground, obviously, because there's billions of dollars at stake here of investor money and consumer money. So everyone's kind of like, I feel like it's we'll solve that when we come to it. But that's the big question mark for me.
I think to kind of go back to like Mark's point, I read a couple of studies. One of them was from SEMrush, which talked about how, people are making that like informational journey, and that's why like the informational queries are also like rapidly declining, because when people are not sure about what decision to make, they're trying to have that conversation with the LLM using like deep research to be able to like work out what the best option is. And when they go to the website from an LLM, that's when they're ending up converting like better, because they've already made that decision to actually visit that website and make that purchase. And I'm curious to see how product feed implementation would also work with ChatGPT and Perplexity. I know that they've partnered up with Shopify and PayPal. And I think it will be interesting to see, okay, how many actually like direct sales would we get within those LLM platforms? Because I think that will also be like a huge game changer in terms of, one, the amount of revenue that brings, and two, how do we track it and how do we kind of also inform our clients that we were part of that particular, user journey, because our metrics will drop down. But if revenue stays high and we're actually growing year on year, then I think we've done a really good job in optimizing everything.
Yeah, and as SEOs, we love numbers and we love metrics. Most of them are completely made up and nonsensical. The only one that's universal and that everybody understands is revenue. So that should be all that matters at the end of the day. Reddit's the interesting one, of course, as Mark mentioned. And I've seen a certain backlink service recently that's selling Reddit backlinks for, over £1,000. And it's not going to be useful, but I'd love to know, like, how they're getting away with that in terms of the customers, but whether or not that's actually going to produce anything tangible, what revenue is that actually going to generate? Probably zero. The other thing is, we know that Reddit is obviously a really gated platform. It's very community driven. And if you do get genuine mention a link on there, then amazing. That's certainly going to be valuable. But when you've got backlink platforms that are trying to do it, it's going to be spammy. And we've seen instances where the likes of Reddit are already aware of it and they're taking down accounts that they see are actively using these spammy tactics. So yeah, it's an interesting one to keep an eye on. And I don't think backlink services are entirely bad. like Dave said, as long as you're using reputable ones. And personally, I'd rather go down the route of digital PR, but obviously there's a bigger budget involved in that, and it's not a quick win. Nothing is. But yeah, if you are going to use them, fine. Just make sure that you know where they're coming from and that it's not AI driven in terms of I'm just going to insert a link here because it's got a high domain rating or whatever it is they're trying to sell you.
Yeah, so I was also thinking about, a lot of the tools, like our legacy tools, I don't want to name names, but they're highly focused around keyword research and keyword tracking and audits, showing technical issues and so on. So that how much longevity have those got if they don't start catching up with the trends that are going on now and going to be happening for the foreseeable future? I mean, there's some tools, are probably more equipped, as I said earlier, like Mark's, where with this whole query fanning thing and everything, it kind of actually plays into quite a fair bit. But for those legacy ones, I know they are introducing slowly metrics into it and stuff like that, but some are questionable in terms of how accurate they are. But do you think they've still got legs? Because I know when I did that survey, the amount of tools that SEOs are using is so vast. And now what's even better is you've got tools like Replit and other AI models that you can build your own tools, and there's ChatGPT models and so on. So yeah, that's wondering on that side, those kind of more bigger legacy tools. Again, I won't say but what do you think the future is for them? I guess it depends on if they adapt, but yeah.
I've got so many opinions on this. So one thing I've learned from running a SaaS tool is that there's a huge percentage of SEOs that have no idea what the data is that they're using. Like the questions I get on live chat from also asked, asking like if I can give search volume data and not understanding the difference between like PAA data and Google Suggest data and other trend data. It's all like mixed together. People just doing keyword research or search research just straight into ChatGPT and asking it for search volumes. Like these are all like super common things that are happening. So in terms of those tools, especially the larger, well-known ones that lots of people are kind of on, I don't think it's going to affect them massively because, to be honest, I think a lot of their customers, with respect, don't really get, they just kind of trust what the tool's been showing them, and they're not interrogating it that much. There is like a mad scramble at the moment of tools trying to add features. And that's because I think it's for the people in between who have got maybe stakeholders, managers who desperately want a security blanket of some kind of metric to tell them everything's going to be okay so they can sleep at night. And I think a lot of people using those metrics know they're very imperfect, but they still use them because it gets their like managers off their back, basically, rightly or wrongly. And I feel quite strongly the same is true of a lot of metrics that we use in the industry. Like we basically won't do a lot of SEO forecasting because I think it's a waste of time most of the time. In terms of like, we've had someone come to us for digital PR and they're like, you need to tell us the ROI for what you've suggested to do for digital PR. And I'm like, I can't. Like, it's a huge amount of work and it would still be an incredibly wide guess. You'd be better off just spending that time doing something. And if you don't do it, someone else will. And then lastly, the new kind of breed of tools, you've got now a lot of AI focused ones. Again, the methodologies that I've sat down and spoken to those people they're using, I think still need to evolve. Like we haven't onboarded like an AI platform yet because I don't think anyone's kind of cracked it in a way that's going to be particularly helpful for the amount of time, effort, and money that goes into getting that data.
Yeah, I don't think there's any one perfect tool at the moment. And, the bigger tools, people have got their reports set up based on them. Everything's, nice and simple. Clients understand what they're being shown each month, and people don't want to change. Therefore, the platforms don't change. They maybe add some extra things on, but they don't remove the old stuff, which means that people are still focused on keywords almost purely. Moz, who are definitely a kind of legacy tool in a lot of ways, I guess maybe because their user base dropped so much, have sort of a little bit reinvented, and they're kind of gone a little bit more topic focused rather than purely keyword focused, which I think is a better approach. There obviously still keywords in there. So yeah, there's no one tool that's really doing everything perfectly at the moment. Maybe that's why you've got so many tools. Maybe we need a bit of consolidation.
Yeah, fair points. And I guess this leads quite nicely onto the next topic. And it's about, because there's been, when I looked on LinkedIn, and people were talking about how much conferences are, or how much tools are, or when they add things on, they want even more money for certain features. It all stacks up, and SEO budgets aren't always the biggest ones in the company. And tools could be quite expensive, especially when you have several of them. But do we think SEO is overpriced, and do you see any issues with that? I just wanted to get people's opinions on this one. Nikki?
The short answer is you get what you pay for. A lot of times, whether you're working with a freelancer or an agency, there's always someone that's going to do it cheaper. And at that point, you just a race to the bottom, both in terms of the results you're going to get and in terms of what you're going to pay. So no, I don't think it's overpriced personally. A lot of the reason why companies do come to agencies is because they can make use of their tools instead of having to pay a lot of money for one tool. In some cases, especially if they're a large brand, they can pay. Granted, it's a lot of money to work with an agency in most cases, but they can pay that and get access to 10 tools or more. And that gives them a lot more data than what they would otherwise. And they know they've got a dedicated team of professionals working on their website. So no, I don't think it is. I don't think it is right to undercut ourselves either. It could be that Journey Further's cheaper than Canva, or Canva's cheaper than Journey Further. Like that, it doesn't matter really. It's what the results these agencies are gonna produce, and the relationships that you're gonna have with the people working on your website. I don't think it should ever be, I'm going to go with them just because of price. I mean, that does happen. There's instances where we've lost pitches, and that's been the deciding factor. That's always going to happen. But it's more about, okay, what are you going to get for that? If we've got a lot more zeros on our prices, then okay, what's that going to do, and what are you promising me for that? And I don't mean what results are you promising me, because I completely agree with Mark talking about forecasting, but it's what value is that going to deliver in terms of the data and the people doing the work.
I think whoever you end up working with, you need to make sure that you're the priority. So sometimes, like the very expensive kind of big network agencies, if you're not kind of a blue chip kind of company, then you're not going to get the attention necessarily. And I'm not saying that's the case for absolutely all of them, but I've heard lots of stories where that does end up being the case. So when you're choosing, looking at the size of the other clients, and if there's a few that are a lot bigger than you, maybe you're going to be more the focus, and that's definitely something to bear in mind. So spending more doesn't always mean getting more, but at the same time, underinvesting in SEO is probably the best way to waste money on SEO, in my opinion.
Yeah, no,
yeah,
I completely agree.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say is that, before we go to you, Yordan, sorry, was around, when you're in-house, especially, you have set budgets for the year, they're set in stone, and that's that. So you invest in a tool, shit hits the fan like it has done in SEO, and you're like, you want to adapt, and then all these tools add on the features that perhaps you would want to use, but it's extra money. You don't have the budget, and you're kind of like, you're tired then, in terms of like wait until next year, and obviously you have to find alternative free options or other ways to get that data if you want it. So that's where it becomes a bit tricky. I guess I take your points on board in terms of like agency will have there a bit more flexibility there. Yordan, what do you think?
So in my opinion, it's not overpriced, but we just need to adjust the way we value the way that it's being measured, and evolve that to be able to get the point across of, without us you actually be performing, let's say, worst in the great decoupling, and we're actually bringing a lot of value to not just SEO, but your omni-channel, because we're optimizing your website content, making it like more human first in the way that we look at content within Reflect Digital. And that gives you the opportunity to then like reshare it, engage with it, interact with it, convert better. And I think that's where I think the conversations need to be had. If, for example, you have a client who comes up to you and says, oh, I feel like I'm not getting, value, or someone can do it cheaper, like we talked about earlier. Well, yes, you could buy, 1 million links for $1, but that will crash your website. So don't do that. It's about, bringing that value, that expertise, that knowledge, and having that trusted partnership with your agency or your freelancer. And of course, internal teams, let's not forget them.
And I think that's maybe the problem. So obviously with paid, you have certain ROIs and stuff that really show clearly the performance, and SEO have never, unless you kind of create something. I mean, we're working with like Botify, and they've got their own version of that for organic, that's some sort of formula to try and show the worth of organic. I guess that's always been like the argument, hasn't it? That it's a lot easier to show your in paid to show your results in black and white compared to SEO. Unless you crack it into so like I'm sure
I'd say not always.
Yeah,
we used to have keyword data in analytics, right? We used to be able to see this specific user came from Google and they typed in this keyword. So we had similar data to we had on PPC. But I mentioned it this morning, like John O'Alderson had a great quote, which was SEO stopped being a performance channel when we lost that keyword data. And I think that's really true. So we need to stop pretending it's a performance channel and falling into the trap. It sounds like, Sean, that you've been a victim of, which is like you have a limited budget, but you have to justify it. So you need to spend money on tools to justify it. But the tools themselves generally aren't the things that get you the results, right? They maybe tell you what direction to go in or they report on it. But then you've burnt a load of money on different tools and you haven't got enough left to actually invest in someone doing the work. Whereas if I had a limited budget, I'd be tempted, if you had someone experienced, to essentially fly blind and be like, let's do the things that we know are going to have an impact, that we know are going to improve things, and then see how it lands. Because you're right, there's, it's death by 1,000 cuts for us at an agency. Like the amount of tools we have subscriptions for different clients, different niches, like it's mad what we pay every month. But if we had an in-house limited budget, I would be really strict on, which tool do we need, and how is that going to contribute to what we're making. I think I'm biased if you ask me, is SEO overpriced because I sell it? But I would maybe circle back to everything is worth what its purchaser will pay, and people are still paying for SEO globally, spending hundreds of billions of dollars on it. So I don't think so from that market perspective.
Yeah, fair point. I mean, like the conferences, some of them are seem a lot of money, but then again, they always seem to sell out, as you say. So if the
you mean the ticket prices?
Yeah, just stuff like that in SEO as well. There's conferences, there's obviously the tools as we've discussed, but yeah, some of it seems a lot of money, but as you say, they do sell out the majority of the time.
There's some great conferences filling in the gap at lower price points, which still have some fantastic speakers now, actually. So with conferences, maybe actually there you can spend a little bit less and still get some great value, as long as you can see who the speakers are beforehand, maybe in at least the few that you want to hear.
Yeah, and you can often get a lot more value from conferences by attending the local ones. I mean, again, I'm biased because I'm on Tech SEO North and we're traveling around the UK because of how expensive it is to get down to the likes of London and Brighton. It's cheaper to fly to Barcelona. So we've done like Manchester, Leeds. We're going to be doing Sheffield and Liverpool next. And, we've had like great names and on that and really great feedback. We also do like webinars as well. And, we were lucky enough to have Mark on our first one. And those sorts of conversations you can get a lot more out of than maybe at the likes of Brighton SEO, which I still attend. There's a big part of the networking down there, but yeah, it is definitely expensive. But I guess as with anything, you get out what you put into it in a way, and it is an investment in yourself and in your team. If it's the manager or the stakeholders that are paying for the tickets, then yeah, if you want your staff to continue to learn and produce the best work and keep up with what's going on in the industry, then they need to have a seat at the table and be learning from the people that have been doing it for the longest.
Yeah, it's very valid. I know there's a lot of local events. I know, Mark, you do some, and I know obviously Amanda Walls does as well. She's been on the channel. So yeah, it's a great cause. And the bigger ones, Brighton, I always learn stuff at Brighton, even, every single year. So it's valid points. I know it's not the speakers that usually get compensated, but the venues are probably so expensive, and everything else that goes around putting on an event is not cheap. I've been there myself. Yeah.
Give a shout out to Arij though there, who runs Women Tech SEO. So Arij, the tickets aren't massively expensive, but I know she does pay all of the speakers. So I think she just does an excellent job there in practicing what she preaches.
Yeah, you beat me to it, Mark. I was going to say the same thing, and covers expenses as well, which is a big part of it. And also, when you're taking part in the likes of the webinars that they do at Women in Tech, they also pay their speakers at that level as well. It's not just all about being at the big stage and barbecuing. Like they really do look after anybody that's adding value to that community.
And that's why she has a book on community building, because she knows how to do it right. And it's great to have people like that in the industry to show how it's done. And I think that model could hopefully be replicated on like a larger scale across the industry, because, it takes a long while for a speaker to go and like produce a deck, prepare a topic and like research it in depth and produce something which is worth like attending and listening to. And I love the small conferences, and I also love the fact that we have so many like webinars, like podcasts like today, where, people are giving up their time and like sharing their knowledge with the wider industry, and that's, publicly available for free.
I guess this is the other opposite end of everything's worth what is purchased or will pay for it, in terms of people still speak at Brighton SEO every year, and they're oversubscribed in people wanting to be speakers, even though they in fairness, I think they pay the travel if you're coming like from abroad maybe, and I know they pay for the hotel and stuff. So it's not like they're giving a raw deal. I'm not saying that. But obviously they still have people banging at the door to speak there, because there is value, right, to getting on that stage and having people like get to know you and hear your ideas. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I think that's why I love this kind of. I know we have our moments sometimes on LinkedIn. There's some beef with people sometimes, but generally, as a community, we really do share, and that's why I'm so appreciative that people like yourselves come on. And I'm learning. Like, I'm just trying to soak it all in from you guys, really. But hopefully one day, if it does get to any form of monetization, I would share it happily with anyone who came on. So, I just think it's a great community. And like you say, the Women in Tech, I am trying to get a show dedicated to that group on here to kind of have a bit of a show around that, but it's work in progress, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, no, definitely good shouts there. Let's finish off with the last topic, and we actually have got through most topics, which is good. So, this is a real one that's been discussed a lot actually in the conversations I have. What role will websites play in 3 or 4 years down the line? It's going to be interesting as, large language models grow, AI mode comes into full action, AI agents become more developed and matured, and just generally as search evolves. How do you think, what do you see the role of websites being? Nikki, what do you think?
The short answer is I don't think they're going anywhere. I think it's just going to change. And e-commerce, if there is such a thing, I think e-commerce is the safest option, in quotes. It's definitely going to change, and we've got like more and more emphasis being put on product feeds, and Yordan was talking earlier about the Shopify integration. I think that's definitely one to watch, and it's just going to be more ways for people to convert in that aspect. But as it's been more challenge, it already is more of a challenge for informational and publisher-based businesses, but the LLMs need to get their data from somewhere, even if they're stealing it from these websites. I think it's just going to be more about creating that experience and adding that value that only you and your website can provide. So why should a customer come to your website? What are you going to deliver that an LLM can't? And that's something that everybody's going to have to learn and adapt to. And it's not an easy question to answer either. And I don't necessarily think it's one that we can answer today. It'd definitely be interesting to see what, the rest of the speakers have to say on that. But it is going to be a challenge, but it's one that as SEOs will continue to do what we've always done, which is learn and adapt, really.
Yeah, it'd be interesting as well. Obviously, Cloudflare have talked about this pay-per-crawl model. If that becomes a wider thing, people actually get rewarded for that. And also, like, we have to always say that SEO is far beyond just your website. It is like other parts of the journey that we can optimize as well. So, Yordan, what do you think?
I absolutely agree with the points which Nikki made, and I was hoping to talk about the paper crawl, but you took that point away from me. So now I'm going to talk about kind of a piggyback of the point which Nikki made about personalization and customization. Your customers need to come to your website and have a reason to do that, be it for that element of being able to add like additional customizations to that product. So for example, when we look at IKEA, you could buy the box standard, packaged furniture. However, they also give you that ability to go onto their website and then customize, let's say, like a kitchen based on your exact dimensions, add the additional fittings, change bits and bobs. And I think that's where the websites will come into play for things which aren't like box standard and like more towards like premium, but you would still have, audience which is LLM confident and wants to shop through that channel. And you still have an audience which is, I want to go to the website. I want to read as much as possible about the brand, the product, especially when it comes to like bigger financial decisions or investments. So I think it's another case of it depends. The industry is changing so much and so quickly, but it's exciting to see which direction we go into. And I think SEOs will be at the forefront of like navigating that journey and giving advice as to how we can proceed further.
Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, I think 4 years is going to, when we look back, going to feel like a long time. I think, even in a year's time from now, I think we may already be getting to the point where websites are just one way that people access information online, and also, actually interact with services online. And for me, like, if we're talking about e-commerce, if we're talking about selling things like services, if the action takes place through agentic AI, it doesn't matter too much. And I can't remember who it was said it earlier actually, but somebody mentioned, if revenue is the thing that really matters if you're in, e-commerce. So if people are buying things through an AI agent, it doesn't matter too much. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think there's a real opportunity for leveling the playing field, because a lot of the advantages that somebody like Amazon have at the moment, in that they've got a huge range of products, they've got loads of reviews, they've got good prices, they've got all these reasons why you just go straight there as your starting point, do one-click purchase. Well, actually, you can compare very quickly with agentic AI all of the products available that meet your needs, and you can be much more specific about what you're looking for. And then the agentic AI will be able to, relatively soon perhaps, actually create the account for you if you don't have one, and make the purchase for you. And I think, definitely in 4 years' time, we'll be at that point. I think there'll still be some people who prefer to use a website, in the same way that right now there's some people who only use e-commerce for some things. But I think there's, it's going to be really interesting there. And then the focus, I guess, then becomes more onto the actual product or the pricing and meeting people's needs there. But at the same time, you've got to make sure that the AI agents can actually access the back end of your website as well as the front end of your website. And I think the back end will be just as important as the front end in 4 years' time.
I think Dave made some really good points there. So I think that website traffic is going to decrease significantly over the next 4 years, because I think in some ways websites are anti-consumer, in that I made this comparison earlier, like when you go into a supermarket in the UK, they put all the bread and the milk and the eggs at the back of the shop. So you have to walk past everything else first, right? Lots of websites are designed like this, with dark patterns or trying to optimize conversion rates and have add-on stuff, which is all stacked in the favor of the business. It's not really consumer friendly. They give you extra hurdles to get over and sometimes trick you into doing things. Whereas like agentic AI, to use an example, would be you can sit outside the shop and then you say, oh, I want to buy some bread, and it'll go in and it'll bring out 3 different loaves for you and be like, this one's the cheapest, this one is like the healthiest, this is what people are saying about this one. You're like, oh, I want that one. And there's none of the friction. If there's one thing we can see from history very clearly, it's that people will do the thing that gives them roughly the same outcome if it's less effort, if it's less energy. Amazon's a great example of this. When I was at a conference recently, I asked people to put their hands up if they use Amazon regularly, and like 80% or so put their hand up. And then I said, keep your hand up if you think Amazon is like an ethical, good company. And basically everyone put their hand down, right? And it's like, yeah, they know they're like kind of anti-consumer, they're anti-small business, they're not doing good really for the world. They even got rid of their Smile program, their charity thing. But people use it because it's less effort, because I don't have to make the account, because I know I've got Prime and it will come with me tomorrow and I don't have to pay $3.99 for delivery. I just don't care at the end of the day. And I think that's what's going to happen. And even actually with more complex purchase decisions, I think we're going to get like MCPs that can essentially open up the API to allow these agents to converse with them and solve a lot of those problems in a lot easier way, because our most natural way of communicating something isn't translating into a search term and clicking and then using our fingers and our eyes. It's just talking, because we do it, most of us do it every day, right? So I think that's where people are going to lean towards. But I don't think it's a bad thing for search, because all those things have to be optimized, as Dave said, and you still need your brand to exist within those models, and it needs to understand what your brand's about. And there's probably going to be more technical requirements than ever to make all of this happen. I imagine if everyone started hooking their products up to MCPs so they can just be directly accessed by all these, like that's like a whole industry thing that will need to happen and probably will have to happen.
Yeah, I think it's very likely. I think one thing that did come out of the meeting with Google is like people don't know what they don't know, and the AI tools will play a big part in those onward journeys if they're needed, because say you do have been diagnosed with cancer and you research about the cancer type on Google or wherever, it'll tell you about it, but then it may not tell you about all the additional support lines and grants and so on and so, and point you into those journeys. They're going to be important, especially in our sector, to make the website still relevant and what we're doing. And I think personally that we touched upon, I think websites in 4 years' time are going to be more like data centers that just get pulled for information. And like you say, like we said before, if you're doing your job properly, you're offering that unique content that others aren't, then you're going to be more likely to use as a source than the others. And that would be the fight. A bit like what we're doing now, I guess, but in just a different way. Is there anything else on this topic from anyone?
I mean, just coming back to talking about Amazon, it is worth bearing in mind that they are themselves kind of really getting ahead already, I think, in terms of they've already got in beta testing, being able to use Alexa and using, Nora actions to be able to order through Amazon. So all this, great stuff that we can, potentially be able to do, and, want to kind of catch up with, Amazon already stealing a march there. And I think it's something like less than 1% of e-commerce sites currently have MCP servers set up for even kind of giving access to things like the product data. So there's a lot that we need to do, and it's probably going to happen more quickly than we think.
I'd be surprised if it was even 0.1%. I can't even imagine anywhere near 1 in 100 e-com sites having an MCP set up. Like the amount of people I've dealt with e-com where they're like the absolute, like they don't even have a product feed.
Yeah. think you're right.
But the thing is, I feel like, let's say, websites which are already set up on Shopify, for example, that process could potentially be automated through that partnership that they're working on. And I think that's where this will come into play. And I think that's also where our optimization will become key, because I've seen e-commerce websites where the product descriptions is absolutely like horrific. And you think, okay, how on earth is that even like indexed full stop? And when we optimize, we know we're optimizing for the broad spectrum of, search engines, LLM powered search, etc., etc. And you also have, social media coming into play as well through the stuff like, let's say, TikTok Shop, etc. So I think let's just look at it as like omni-channel and opportunities of where can we place our like clients' websites and give them the highest ROI.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, well, I've kept you for a long time, so I appreciate everyone's time. It's been an awesome conversation, and yeah, I mean, there's so much going on. Like, there's so many angles we could have took, but I think we covered some great stuff. So yeah, I really appreciate all your time, and yeah, I hope you have a great weekend. And yeah, thank you again.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much. Last hour has flown by. It's been a lot of fun.